very, very excited and very privileged to have Fred P with us today. Give up for Fred. I guess we're in a really privileged place right now, you know, because essentially this wouldn't be happening if you hadn't heard music from the UK. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
So before that happened, you obviously had quite a bad time in the music industry. I'm talking about the early part of your career.
I would say that. It's a little bit of being disillusioned with what it was really about at the time.
Yeah. So at the time being a very opportune word there. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. I mean, as producers and artists, you know, it's very difficult. You know, it's one big creative journey, isn't it? It's never, you know, it's challenging. It's amazing for a lot of reasons, but in terms of this connection between the music you want to make and your vision and dealing with other sides of the industry, you know, it can be challenging. Can you tell us about the experience that you had, some of the experience you had in the early part of your career that led you to almost give up music entirely?
Well, okay. Well, to be quite honest, I didn't really have a vision in the beginning. I just wanted to make the music I heard in my head to go with the records I was buying at the time, because I felt like, you know, I could put something in there to make it interesting. And my cousin came to me with an opportunity to get studio time in a real proper studio. The thing is, I wasn't making hip hop at the time. I was doing it like, you know, house tracks, stuff like that.
When are we talking here?
It's about 92. When he approached me with this opportunity, I'm like, okay, real studio, get the, you know, better quality, whatever, right? And one thing led to another, and I started to get into producing hip hop. And that's when I started to develop somewhat of an idea, like, you know, this could possibly become something. During that period, I met the guy who basically mentored me and taught me how to make things sound good, and, you know, song structure, stuff like that, how to set up mics and so on, equipment, different types of things. He basically brought me into the production world properly. So even though that situation didn't work out, I still got an education out of it. But I didn't know anything about the business side of the industry. So to make a long story short, we took advantage of the opportunity, developed some demos, got right to the front door, but because of the material we were presenting, we were asked to do something that wasn't exactly within our character.
Okay. And what was that?
Well, we were more or less on some consciousness type of thing, and the label was more or less interested in a more gangster approach.
Okay. So they wanted more Onyx, I guess, and you were more X-Clan, no?
Okay, well, somewhere in between there. I mean,
to be specific.
I won't go so far as say X-Clan, but I mean, it was more or less about, we were being more true to ourselves, and we were more or less interested in things like metaphysics and stuff like that. They were looking really for like straight up, you know, gun talk and all that, and because we know what we're talking about, we realized we couldn't do that because, you know, your words mean something. So yeah, that ended that scenario, and I became very disillusioned and just stopped.
I'm just imagining the A&R meetings right about now.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Can you tell us a typical scenario, if you don't mind?
Well, I wasn't really involved in that side of it because I'm too sensitive for it. I'm very close to the stuff that I make. So that was kind of handled for us. And let's just say nobody was happy after that scenario came to a close. I basically sold everything in my studio and got a job as a security guard.
So looking back, was that a bit reactive? I mean, I know it was 92, you know, it was pre-internet, obviously, and the idea of, you know, the idea of making music in your bedroom and having the opportunity to, in terms of recording a great studio with great resources and ultimately people investing in you, for that to kind of do, I guess, thrown against, you know, for you to go through this process, for somebody to say you're doing something wrong, that's obviously, you know, your reaction was to go, you know what, I'm not interested, I'm going to solo my gear. You know, was that a bit extreme, do you think, looking back?
Well, to be quite honest, I thought it was like that throughout the entire industry. Like everything was like that, and you kind of had to be what the powers that be wanted you to be, and I was unwilling to do that. And then I also too realized how difficult it was because I threw myself into it completely. I dedicated all my time to it, and I really internalized all these different processes and thought about it night and day and worked night and day, and all for no money. You know, this is just my time, and this went over a period of a couple of years. And I did it because I realized that, you know, this is something I want to do, and I'm willing to give that. But when I had that experience, I'm like, you know, do I want to go through that kind of pain, that kind of disappointment? Because, I'm very extreme. I'm either all the way this way or all the way that way. So it seemed normal at the time to do that. I mean, that's my personality. Was I, looking back, was it the right decision? Maybe not selling all the stuff in the studio, but...
Yeah, because you must have had some pieces that, you know, we're talking 92 now, right? So what kind of equipment did you have back then?
Well, I had a Kai S950, a Korg 01W, Tascam Porta Studio, DAT machine, had this vintage 12-track analog board.
You should have kept that on.
Yeah. But, you know, the thing is, I didn't really have an attachment to it. What I had attachment to was the material that came out of it. So to let it go didn't really affect me that much. And I learned a great lesson from it. I realized that I was more invested in the actual creative process. That's the thing that actually brought me joy and I felt most comfortable. And when I wasn't doing it, you know, it just had a complete effect on my reality that I didn't expect. And it wasn't until I reconnected with the music again that I began to actually breathe. So,
talk us through that moment where you reconnected with the music. You know, my understanding was that, you know, you heard some music from the UK, and then that was almost like a pivotal moment. And that was almost like a, you explain it to us.
Well, I was on my way to work, and I ran into a good friend of mine from the neighborhood that I grew up in. He lived right around the corner from me. He's the only other guy in the neighborhood that was into house music. And we hadn't seen each other for a few years, and we reconnected. And he would come to my job and bring me cassette tapes of music he compiled while traveling Europe. And basically, the music that was on these tapes were basically all my heroes, you know, like For Hero, Modaji, G-Force, you know, the list goes on and on and on. But it was mostly like a mixture of what was going on in West London at the time.
The Goy music thing.
Exactly. And Detroit, and, you know, like early ambient stuff. Just a nice mixture of music that had all the elements of house, but in a completely different thought process, like deconstructed, reconstructed, and just done in different ways that I'd never heard before. And I would listen to these cassettes going to work, coming from work, every day, and have emotional moments on the train. People will look at me like I'm crazy because I'm hearing the most beautiful thing I've ever heard, and I'm feeling inspired, but then I'm feeling like, man, you know, something's missing. And the thing that was missing is that I wasn't involved. I wasn't, you know, doing my thing that I normally do that actually made me feel complete. So that inspired me to start building a studio again, which was very difficult. I mean, this is another life lesson, because the first studio I built came rather easily, and I didn't realize the position I was in.
Was that because you had an advance and you used the advance to buy the equipment? Is that right? Or?
Well, no, actually, I was just in a fortunate position to get the equipment rather easily. Okay. And that's what I'm going to say about that. And the thing is that the second time around, I really had to work for it. I mean, I'm working at a job, the pay wasn't so great, and I'm doing like all these long hours. Equipment was still extremely expensive. So I had to like go and get piece by piece all, you know, I think to get like maybe 3 pieces, it took me like 2 years. But it was worth it, because in the end, I was really, really dedicated in making things that were closer to where I wanted to be. So I'd say around 99, 2000, okay, I was starting to become productive again.
So what was that trilogy?
Well, I don't know if I can really describe it, because at that point, everything was kind of running together. I mean, it was a combination of the things I was listening to, the things I thought I wanted to make, and then that, you know, that I don't know, I wanted to throw everything that I had in the same track, okay, which became a process of reduction over time, you know, getting to the essence of a thing. So you're talking about like a year of noise dwindling down to recognizable things.
It's a kind of a filtering process, almost like an analog, a low-pass filter as opposed to a high-pass filter situation.
Okay, you could, I guess if you wanted to look at it like that. I think it was more like, you know, being excited and learning how to calm down. Sure. And, because, see, the thing is, you can make something and totally have it in your mind that this is the greatest thing in the world until you have someone interpret it. And then they look at you like, okay, I don't know what language you're speaking. Can you make it more relative for me? And until that moment occurs where you realize you kind of have to be in that middle ground in order to reach people, you know, I mean, whatever it is, it could be genius, but just that little thing could make it practical for folks to grasp. And I think that's the most important thing when communicating with music. I had to really like seriously get a hold of myself with that. And my good friend, whose name is Jay Locke, this guy is amazing. I mean, he worked at Dance Tracks in New York for like 7 years. And he was basically the reason why I'm sitting here today. You know, I mean, he gave me the music, and he would listen to the music I was making, and he was brutally honest. He's like, you know, okay, this is crap, man. I don't know what you're doing. This is, I don't know, there's something there. Maybe work on this. And we went through this for about a year, and then it got to a point where I made stuff where like, okay, dude, you can play this for people. He would even play some of my stuff at gigs he would do, so I can hear what it sounds like on a system and how people related to it, and which was the most important lesson, because that's important to see how people, you know, get involved with the things that you're making. So for me, I think the best thing I got out of that time, besides learning how to appreciate what I had in front of me, was to basically get out of my head and simplify things. that's the biggest lesson I got out of that period.
And what were the 3 pieces of equipment that brought you back?
Wow. Okay. Well, I had an Akai S01 sampler, which wasn't as nice as the S950, but it definitely did the job. And I also had another Porter Studio, but this time it was a hard disk recorder, and a Korg TR, 16-track sequencer on it.
And all the sequencing was done on the Korg, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And when you start, I mean, I'm curious to know what that feels like to kind of go from throwing a studio away, having all these emotions about the music industry, being really disgruntled and disillusioned, and then going on this kind of path to make money but knowing in the back of your mind you've got this kind of, you're a music maker, you're a producer, you're an artist, that's your thing. So it's almost like it's almost like working the security job was this kind of wilderness kind of thing, and it took your friend. I'm painting this kind of Game of Thrones style scenario thing here. I don't know, maybe. Let me know.
Well, at the time I didn't know that. To be quite honest, I wasn't even thinking about getting back into music. I was quite oblivious to my own state of mind where that was concerned. It was more or less like, okay, this is it, and oh well, I wanted the least amount of responsibility at a job. I just kind of wanted to just sit there and be. But when I realized that the thing that was missing was me making music, and I started to get back into it, I found like a sense of purpose and all that good stuff, and I started to really see things in more high definition. So yeah, I guess you could kind of say I was in the wilderness. Yeah, it was kind of like I was kind of like maybe lost in the oblivion of being a security guard, because that really wasn't my thing, but it was serving its
means
purpose.
to an end, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But even when I started to make stuff, I wasn't thinking about presenting it to people. I was just trying to get to that point where it's like, okay, I'm back to doing something that I truly love. The presenting part, I guess, kind of was a happenstance, because, again, there was a piece I did, gave it to my friend. He's on a train. He's listening to it. He's losing himself to it on the train. Guy asks him, "What are you listening to?" He lets him hear it. He gives him a card. My friend gives me the card. I call the guy. Guy tells me, "Come meet him over here." One thing leads to another, and then that puts me into a scenario where, okay, I'm presenting music again. So it was kind of happenstance, because I could not have done at all. I'm not that personality.
So what's interesting there is that it's like so the guy who had the card who gave the card was whom?
A gentleman by the name of Kervin Mark.
Okay, so what was it about him that was different from the guys, A&R guys? I mean, obviously, gangster rap aside, what is different about giving another music business person your music? What was it about him that there must have been some kind of element of trust, or some kind of element of, what was it?
Well, I would say a little bit more curiosity, because the genre was completely different. In one scenario, the music is hip hop. Other scenario, the music is dance. And I figured, you know what, let me not judge it like it's the previous situation. This is someone who's interested in hearing what I consider to be weird music. So I might as well meet this person. I mean, if they can identify with it, then yeah, it's somebody I should at least have a conversation with. And that turned out to be a very interesting scenario. Like, he invites me to come to this party. It's on a Sunday afternoon party, which I'd never been to before. I didn't even know people did that sort of thing. And I hang out in the booth. I hadn't been in a club since, I couldn't even remember the last time I was in a nightclub, because I swore it all off, because I figured everything was the same. this gentleman has me sit in the booth, like two other guys come in there, and like transported to some distant galaxy for like the next 6 hours. And I'm sitting there and I'm feeling full of emotion and inspiration. And at the end of it all, gives me another card. He goes, call this guy. You might be interested in hearing your music. So I'm like, all right. I follow the breadcrumb and whatnot. But the thing is, even though after following that lead, I guess, that scenario didn't work out. But what it did was it kind of invigorated me. It let me know that, you know, people are interested in what I'm doing. So I pursued it a little bit further and started to make, you know, more relative music. Because that afternoon, sitting in the club listening to what they were playing, I'm like, I'm wondering how can I fit in there? Because nothing I'm doing could fit into that. I'm like listening to the music that my friend gave me, and I'm trying to get closer to that. And what was happening in the club was like a different galaxy away from there.
Can you describe it? Was it what kind of music was it?
Oh, it was like deep house and world music and classics and so on.
What club was it? Can you remember?
It was vinyl. The party was Body and Soul. I didn't even know I was in.
Joe Clausel, blah blah blah. Yeah.
Yeah. My friend was covering for him, but I didn't. I knew the name Francois K. Didn't have a face to go with it, and I learned who Danny Crivet was that day. These guys walked in there and they looked at me like, "Who's this dude?" And they did their thing, and I mean, I was mesmerized, literally mesmerized, and became completely emotional. I know I had to look like a basket case, but they hadn't realized that the last time I was in the nightclub, I was dancing with my friends, and it was a completely different circumstance. They had no idea of the journey I had between then and that point. So to be sitting there and watching people put together scenarios and tell stories with music, I mean, for me, that inspired me to actually, you know, go a step further instead of just not, you know. And I don't know if they, to this day, well, maybe they might have an idea, but the point is that that was a very influential afternoon, and it did a lot for me. And I don't know. I don't think I looked at that position the same ever again.
So what happened after that? So you got another card, another opportunity.
I got another card, and it was another opportunity. Unfortunately, it didn't go the way I thought it would. And in between there, my security job kind of finished, and real life started to kick in. And
what's real life to you? I mean, everyone's different, right?
Like bills and rent and having to eat, roof, stuff like that.
Standard shit. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you know, you kind of need money for that, and and the job wasn't working out, so I started to really look practically at the reality of making music as a living and, getting another job. I ultimately got another job, of course, which I liked a lot less than security. And it required a lot more of my mental power, which really made me uncomfortable because then I was doing less music. And that's when I had to start to think, okay, is this going to be a reality? Because I really need to dedicate myself to this job to take care of my life. Which led me to deciding to not pursue music anymore. So once I made that decision, I said to myself, well, rather than just leaving it alone completely, do one last project, do it yourself independently, and put it out, and then walk away. So that led to me doing the CD Reactions of Light, which is like my first album. and
Or your last, depending how you look at it. Right?
the first last album, and I don't know, something changed. I mean, I did it. I funded it myself, and I made like 100 copies, and I gave some to my friend, who was Jay Locke, who was working at Dance Tracks. He put it in the store. I don't know who was buying it, but some folks bought it, and things kind of changed from that point. After that, I got a email from Jennifer Mayanja. She asked me to do a remix for her, and from doing that, got to meet her husband, who is Just Head, and we developed a relationship, and from that point, everything kind of changed.
And that's kind of segued to where we are today, right?
Yeah, totally. Let's put it this way. After doing that remix, I did a couple projects with Ed on Underground Quality, and then I started to develop Soul People music, because he helped me to develop the physical side of Soul People, mainly vinyl and so on. And did a couple of records that did okay, and then I did a couple more, and I don't know, it's just like life changed completely. I mean, there were ups and downs, but honestly, all I wanted to do was make a record. And I was fortunate enough to make a few records, and some folks liked it, and that encouraged me to make more, and I don't know, I've just been following it ever since.
So you have a record for us, well, albeit a work in progress project.
Yeah. Something I'm doing for a label that asked me to be a part of a compilation. It's relatively simple. It's not anything super complicated, but it basically captures my process. Yeah, basically it's a bit of an experiment, but it's a really simple track, but it's more or less focused on syncopation and minimalism. Not like minimal that everyone hates. It's more like a rhythmic minimal piece, though.
Okay. So let's hear it, and then we'll talk through the project.
Sure.
Nice, nice.
Thank you very much.
So talk us through the building process.
Well, basically, it's relatively simple. If I could just flip it real quick. Well, the kick started out as like two separate kicks, just basic, not very exciting, but when you put them together, you layer them a little bit, they become a little bit more solid. I just kind of double them up to make the signal a little bit more thicker. That way you don't have to turn things up. You can kind of keep them low, which ultimately works out well for the balance at the end. Which is mainly my approach to the whole entire track, is I wanted it to be balanced so there was like as little processing as possible. So if I did process something, it would be more dramatic. For example, let's see, the hat. Had super simple pattern to it, as you can see, right? But if you add a little delay to it, it becomes syncopated. So if you have a very clean signal going in, like these things are tiny. If you see the waveform, it's very small. If, let's say, for example, they were bigger or louder, wouldn't have the same dynamic as something more subtle. So yeah, that's the approach to the entire track. It's to like have a good signal on everything and keep it really simple. So when it gets to the end port, the end process, the end of the process, the 2-track will be like really powerful. So when it goes to mastering and eventually to a record, it's gonna sound huge on a sound system. So yeah, I was going for a very minimalistic, simple, well-balanced, rhythmatic track, which is what this is.
I think we agree, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious to see that it's all audio.
Yeah, well, I basically recorded all the pieces into Ableton, and then where the signals were weak, I just simply doubled them, because you're dealing with ones and zeros once it gets into the machine. And, so things like voltage don't matter. What matters is, just doubling and tripling things up in order to get the wide feeling. So, yeah, I recorded everything in, chopped it down, and, sequenced it and kept it relatively simple.
So the composition part was all done with MIDI initially, right?
Yes.
So did you have an idea of the arrangement at the time, or was it about just finding nice sounds that you were happy with, and then sticking them into Ableton and then working on the arrangement and that side of things after?
Well, exactly. It's mainly about the textures, because the textures are the random parts that you have control over in the machine, but once you put it there, it's there. And I can show you an example of that. Like these little tiny bits. Like that doesn't look like anything at all, right? But if I solo it, I mean, you can, what is that, right?
What is it? I asked that question.
It's me breathing, okay. But over a really bad mic. And it's just a little tiny piece of that. And that's kind of the focus, like really simple, well-recorded things that are kind of like obscure like that, but they sit well in a rhythmatic scheme.
They're all kind of like micro percussive elements, right?
Right. Yeah. So when you have, let's say, for example, all the solid parts like drums and like hats, kicks, claps, whatever, if it's like relatively simple, but doesn't take up a lot of space in the frequency spectrum, you could do stuff like this, and it'll seem like they'll seem like instruments. Like like, you know, you can't exactly describe what it is, but it seems like it's a mechanical element, and it's not. It's organic. I can show you another example. Let's see what this is. Oh, yeah, this is more of my breathing antics. Now
It's got quite a hard attack. So were you kind of was that? Sure, it's not cough.
No. That's breathing turned backwards, and just a little piece of it, and you make one loop, and you duplicate it, so it becomes rhythmic, and then there's no with a little bit of processing, it becomes syncopated, and yeah, it's like really simple elements and textures with very simple rhythmic drum scheme.
Cool. Are you happy with it? Are you happy with what you've done so far?
Well, yeah, so far, yeah, but I'm figuring like on the mix down, it could be like really epic if done properly. And hearing it on this system, I hadn't heard it like this. We're all hearing it at the same time, and I'm like, yeah, not bad. I did kind of hit it. But with the proper mix down, yeah, that's gonna be like really epic in the club, which is what I'm looking for.
What other elements are you thinking of adding? Or is it not about adding? Is it about, what is it about?
Well, I don't know. I'm thinking maybe a little bit more arrangement. Like I can do a couple of more drops in interesting places and maybe accentuate the vocal loop. There's a little vocal loop in there that sounds a little bit insane. And that's me talking, but flipped backwards and filtered.
Let's hear it. I want to hear it in oscillation.
It sounds like an old guy on television. Now, I couldn't tell you what that is, but the point is that with the vocal flip backwards and detuned a little bit, with some minimal processing, which was ping pong delay and what is this? I could show you this one because I don't. Yeah, I did a beat repeat with a chorus and another simple delay. So
it's interesting because we almost as humans we almost want to try and give meaning to the reversed, voice of Fred P.
Well, yeah. Well, I couldn't ask for that. I think that's only natural. You hear things, you want to make it relative to what's going on in your mind, and I think that's probably one of the most beautiful and yet mysterious things about music. It's like the effect of hearing a song that you like, you don't know the words, but you start making the words up yourself. Yeah, it's an amazing phenomena. But like how I'm using this here is more for texture, like the other bits. It's more for feeling and kind of humanizing it a bit, like some form of weird instrument.
Getting a sense that you're really confident with the direction you've taken and the path that you're on. Is that true?
Well, confident. I don't know. I don't know if I would use the word confident because the thing is, this is naturally me, and I'm okay with that. I mean, to say confident about the path, I trust it, and I've been doing pretty okay doing that. I know I'm very passionate about it, and I love it, and it's been a reciprocal thing. And I think that's a good way of being. So I guess, yeah, okay, yeah. I guess you could say it. Yeah, I'm on the right path, I think. As long as I think as long as I keep certain things in the right place and in the right perspective, yeah, it should be okay.
Fred P., thank you so much, man.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you.